For a while now, I've been on the lookout for a very specific kind of game. See, what I've always wanted is a mystery detective type game, but one that actually forces the player to think about the clues, to turn the information over in their heads. One that doesn't just hold your hand or allow you to guess your way through it. Ideally, this game would also have an engaging story, a rising sense of tension within a world that feels believable and immersive. There are several games that have satisfied various elements of this vision. One of them even inspired the first video on this channel. The Edith Finch video. You should watch it after this one, please. Thank you. I'd love to do more videos on this assortment of like-minded games, my own strange compilation that scratched this specific itch. There's Firewatch, which I might cover shortly. There's Her Story, Call of the Sea, Gone Home, Night in the Woods. Each one of these games provide elements of the detective or mystery experience without ever hitting all of the criteria. With this in mind, I typed my usual search of good mystery games on Game Pass, and when The Case of the Golden Idol was suggested, I was mildly curious. Early levels left me less than impressed, but before long I was hooked on a game that perhaps comes closer than any other that I've played in crafting a genuinely immersive detective experience, and with a good story too. As mentioned, I'm looking for a game that really makes you feel like a detective. I'm a huge fan of Agatha Christie, and one of the things I think she has over an author like Arthur Conan Doyle is that she gives readers the same clues as she does to her detectives, giving them the opportunity to work it out in their own heads. Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes stories feel like stories starring a fictional detective, whereas Christie's feel like genuine mysteries that the reader could feasibly try and solve. Both approaches have their strengths, and the Holmes stories are great, let's not ignore that, but Holmes often utilises evidence that the audience hasn't been made aware of, making the stories more a showcase for Holmes's inexplicable genius. Poirot, on the other hand, solves a case using evidence that the audience is privy to, and so when he comes to an unexpected conclusion, it, in my opinion at least, makes him appear more intelligent. We both had the tools, but he figured it out, and I didn't. This isn't an analysis of classic detective fiction, but I wanted to give you an example of media that genuinely makes you feel like a detective, because most games fall short of this goal. And this is what makes Golden Idol so unique and exciting. You open the first chapter and this is it. The situation is yours to explore. Straight away, there's not much doubt as to the nature of this crime. Man number one has clearly just killed man number two, but it's not so much the what or how, but the why that is crucial in these scenarios. I won't go into every case like this, but this first one offers a great example of how this game encourages the player's sense of deduction. So, there are two people involved. You check their pockets, and both have a contract with two names attached. Great, so we know the two names. Check their bags, and there are several pieces of evidence that are all treated equally. No hint is given to their significance. I noticed that the first bag has two portions of treasure, whilst the second only had one. The contract agreed a 2-to-1 split in Cloudsley's favour, so the first bag must be his. That bag also has tobacco in it, and the man on the cliff has a pipe on him, therefore the killer must be Albert Cloudsley. Alternatively, you could find the medicine in the victim's pocket, assume that it must be the doctor mentioned in the document, and reach the same conclusion. It's a simple case to start you off with, but as the amount of evidence and number of participants grows, the puzzles become much harder to solve. By the end, you're not so much filling in gaps as you are constructing entire narratives through your deductions. You pick up possible answers to each blank space as you scan the scene, with red herrings given along with important information. Not every word in a letter will be highlighted, but the game will still draw your attention to some pointless details to make your choice that little bit more difficult. It's an organic way to disguise what is essentially still a multiple choice system. By having all options be possible answers to every blank space, it makes the player consider the scene as a complex event full of different suspects and motivations, rather than as a simple sequence of prompts. If the game had asked specific questions, say, who is this man? And given three options, then it would have been much easier to guess and would only disrupt the player's flow. A game like Leighton Brothers' Mystery Room, as much as I love it, is guilty of this problem. Such a simple puzzle exists more to check that the player is still paying attention than to function as a genuinely challenging puzzle to which the player must employ their powers of deduction. Here, a player can make their deductions in their own time, choosing what to focus on in whatever order they like. That's not to say that guesswork is impossible, but it's limited to a few specific examples. Guessing a name isn't really an issue. As early as the third scene, you're left juggling too many to easily tell who's who. Different types of evidence are marked with different coloured answers though, leaving a few instances where the blank space is easy to guess without too much effort. In the third scene, for example, Peter Batley was upset to receive blank in Sebastian's will. Well, aphorisms is the only word that makes grammatical sense. Names don't have this problem. Any name will make sense in any slot available for it. This isn't to say that a brute force approach is impossible, at least when you're confined to small examples. If you fill in the scroll incorrectly, it goes red and tells you that you're wrong. If you've only made 2 mistakes though, the scroll goes yellow. This means if you quickly replace each answer, the answer that doesn't make the scroll turn red is the incorrect one, and then you can just cycle through your options until you get it right. Aside from these small issues though, the gameplay is incredibly well refined, and it's not like these features ruin anything, far from it. The yellow warning is helpful for when you make a little mistake, and there are always going to be easier puzzles that the player can solve at the beginning of a level. They operate like the edges of a jigsaw puzzle, a framework in which the trickier mysteries can be attempted. And as with any loophole like this, it's up to the player to choose whether they use them or not. I did a few times and always felt bad afterwards. When I actually thought through the puzzles properly, the feeling was much more fulfilling, and as you can imagine, it made the game far more enjoyable. I will also say, having played this game on a console, the control wasn't perfect. Being a point and click game, the controls are limited to 2 options on a controller. You could use the joystick to replicate the mouse and control a cursor, but the joysticks just aren't as accurate to control, and mine kept sliding all over the place. The hitboxes are decently sized, but it's not ideal. I preferred using the D-pad to flip between options, but for some reason the sequence of options never seemed to cycle the way you would expect them to. I sometimes found myself moving through several choices seemingly without any discernible pattern, just trying to select the option that's closest to me. These are minor points though. The game was clearly made to be played on a computer, and if it hadn't been on Game Pass, I might never have played it, so I'll take what I can get. For the most part, the control is optimised as much as possible, and it's not like there is much to actually control. As mentioned, a large part of the gameplay is just there to facilitate the deductions that you make in your own head. By the time you've completed the first few levels, you start to see familiar names cropping up multiple times, and as the game progresses even further, you realise that they're all linked, with many of them reappearing in various cases and situations. There's Edmund Cloudsley, the elderly bachelor, Peter Batley, the scrounging nephew, David Goran, the scheming henchman, Alistair Koch, the reactionary soldier, and so on. It sometimes gets a little bit confusing with the number of names being thrown about, but it's worth it to become immersed in the intense world that they inhabit. A quick point to note, the world itself is gorgeous. Unlike many other historical mysteries which so often take place in the 19th century, this game is instead set in the 18th, and it's a very refreshing change of pace. The Regency estates and country taverns are great environments to investigate, whilst the characters in their powdered wigs and Georgian clothing are just a joy to interact with. The pixel artwork really does them all justice, perfectly capturing the humour in some characters and the menace in others. I can't praise this setting enough. It's just a beautiful world to be in, and it makes everything that follows feel that little bit more unique. I love a good Victorian mystery, but this is a time period that does not get the attention that it deserves. So, Albert Cloudsley kills Oberon Geller and steals the idol that he had in his bag. He then leaves the idol to his son, Sebastian, but when Sebastian dies, the 4 people named in his will soon become embroiled in a fight for what exactly? The statue, or just his wealth and estate? The idol fades in and out of these first few cases as you get sucked into the bloody story of the Cloudsley family and their associates, all of whom seem to want something from one another. In case 4, a man is murdered and the theft of something important is mentioned, but in the next scenario the focus shifts to the discontentment from Edmund Cloudsley's housemaid and his own attempts to woo the beautiful Mary Richards whilst his nephew Peter does the same. The world is littered with story details, and it's up to the player to determine which of them are important at any given moment. Edmund may have a book on secret codes, but is that as significant as Ada's dirty novel or Brian's radical pamphlet? Or is the solution here to take the detail from one character and apply it to another? It's these relationships and scenarios that make this such a complex and rewarding world. Although, as you soon discover, the reach of this family and the elusive idol stretches far beyond such petty family drama. It's amazing how the full scope of the story hides in plain sight. The murders and the family dynamics help obscure the building blocks of the conspiracy. For example, you notice that a few people have red rings in their pockets, but you pay it no mind. It's obscured by the other miscellaneous items in their possession: loose change, small weapons, betting slips, things like that. Although it comes and goes, the idol is always at the centre of the story in the player's mind, leaving otherwise strange details able to remain unnoticed. Like in case number 5, when Ada Baker attempts to kill Edmund Cloudsley, I barely question the identity of the so-called Proud Beast Master who got her to carry it out. It's not Proud Beast Master, it's Dark Hand Steward. I got it wrong, and I've only just noticed. I'm editing this video now, and it's really embarrassing because I said it with such conviction, and I'm going to say it again, and I'm going to say it just as strongly, and yeah, it's Dark Hand Steward, not Proud. How many times have you mixed up your Dark Hand Stewards with your Proud Beast Masters? I know we've all been there, but yeah, Dark Hand Steward is the one. My mind was more focused on who had the idol and where it was at that particular moment. This Proud Beast Master is later revealed to be a member of a secret society who were bequeathed the golden idol in Sebastian Cloudsley's will, but failed to receive it after Edmund had it stolen. Suddenly, the red rings all make sense, as do certain suspicious notes like the message to Will and White or the mask in Sebastian's bedroom. But even this revelation is only a sample of what's to come, as before long the society has been infiltrated by the stranger Lazarus Hearst, who utilises the society's resources in support of his political party, the New Order Party. They end up losing the 1792 election in favour of a Liberal and Tory coalition. Loyalist and moderate, of course. But Hearst frames one of the party leaders for the murder of the other. This story is a great example of how the game constructs its multi-layered narrative. See, the murder of Augustus Valentine is the puzzle to solve, and without digging around, it remains an open and shut case. Alistair Koch kills a man and pins it on someone else. But the newspaper left on a bench reveals the political identities of both men, the probable reason for the murder, and allows the player to assume that Koch is in league with Hearst without any of this being told outright. And with this act, the place turns into a dystopian nightmare. The New Order Party seizes power and organises mass trials to uncover dissenters within their ranks, with each citizen given a score based on their social merit. Anything from excessive emotion to keeping secrets can mark a person down, with negative merits resulting in your life force being taken from you as punishment, all thanks to the power of the idol. The actual country in which the game takes place is never specified, and all the locations are made up, but I love the hybrid of Regency England and revolutionary France that's created here. The place names all sound vaguely English, as does the parliamentary system that they use, but the imagery of these tribunals is very reminiscent of those imposed by the Committee of Public Safety following the French Revolution. Perhaps in a nod to this, people carry pounds and shillings at the start of the game, but these then change to francs following the rise of the New Order Party. The pattern on top of the soldiers' helmets also looks suspiciously like the tricolour. But then they call the new money Albion francs, and Albion is an old name for Great Britain, so who even knows? It's a good blend, is what I'm saying. I like it. The story culminates in a single chaotic day. The leaders of the New Order Party are poised to overthrow the king, and their route to the palace happens to pass almost every location that you've investigated. At this point, you can switch between various cases, as the events of the past help explain what's happening in the present. You can revisit the scenario in Edmund Cloudsley's cabin, for example, and then return to it now in ruins. Lazarus Hearst has vanished, having seemingly developed a soft spot for Mary Richards, who married Peter Batley following the dinner at Edmund's house. At first this seemed like an odd twist, but before long you realise that Lazarus Hearst is really the new identity of Edmund Cloudsley, presumed dead following the explosion in his cabin, but really using the idol to steal back his youth and infiltrate the society that wanted him dead. Unfortunately for Lazarus, he's killed by Peter Batley whilst trying to kidnap Mary, and the remaining leaders then turn on each other in his absence. And with that, the game is up. The New Order Party, which once had inspired true faith, descends into the chaos of power, corruption and lies. Even their leader, Lazarus Hearst, was killed in this bizarre love triangle between himself, Peter and Mary Batley. It's a shame that this didn't all happen at the start of the week, because then it really would have been a Blue Monday. The case of the Golden Idol is a fantastic mystery game with a gripping story, beautifully realised setting, and an approach that encourages the player to really think about the puzzles that they're solving in the context of a larger narrative. And yet, I can't say I enjoyed the experience quite as much as, say, Edith Finch or Her Story. And honestly, I think it's just how I played it. In fact, for anyone watching this who hasn't played it yet, which maybe isn't that many of you seeing as how you've just spoiled it for yourself, I would recommend playing it with a pad and pencil next to you. I felt like I had to keep track of all the clues in my head, and the experience sometimes felt a little bit overwhelming. I would occasionally attempt to brute force my way through answers just so that I didn't need to remember a certain name or event. Like I said earlier, the game doesn't distinguish between important and unimportant information once you've found it, and whilst this would make the gameplay easier, it also removes the ability of the player to decide themselves what's important and what isn't. It could collate all the relevant letters in a scene so that you didn't have to keep checking people's pockets, but that would then remove the feeling of making the connection yourself. This is where the pad and paper would come. I wish I had written the information down myself, because then I wouldn't have had to cycle through the different pieces of evidence awkwardly. I could have just made my deductions properly without feeling like I had too much information to filter through. I played Her Story, sat at my computer with a notepad, and it was one of the best gaming experiences I've ever had. And it's a shame, because as good as the narrative in Her Story was, this game's story is so much more interesting. Seriously, a historical setting, dystopian government, and a supernatural conspiracy, this game was made for me. I've never played The Return of the Obra Dinn, but it seems to take a similar approach in terms of its gameplay and setting, so perhaps that will be a lesson for if and when I play it. In the meantime, maybe I'll check out the DLC that's available for the Case of the Golden Idol, and for anyone left who hasn't played the main game, I can't recommend it enough. For fans of the mystery genre, I would say that it's one of the best. I hope you enjoyed this little dive into a game that really just grabbed my attention recently. If you like this video, then consider subscribing and maybe even checking out some of the other content on this channel. It's quite similar to this, so if you liked this, then you'll probably like the other stuff, but also slightly different. So if you didn't like this, firstly, just well done for persevering, and secondly, maybe there's something else around here that you'll enjoy. You never know. But most importantly, as always, just thanks for watching.